We're here at the ODI in London and we're joined by Dr Dave Tarrant. Hi Dave.
Hi Tom.
Thanks for spending some time with us.
Not a problem at all. Welcome to the space.
So Dave, what exactly is open data?
So open data, quite simply defined, is data that anyone can access, use and share. So fundamentally it's not actually about how the data is made available by businesses or organisations. It's about what people can do with it once they have it. So they can access it, get hold of it in some way, but once they have it, they can use it, they can share it with others, they can remix it, they can find insight. So it's kind of that unlimited ability to use it for benefit.
So Dave, the open data movement has been growing now for some time. It's becoming more global, more important. What are the actual history, what are the origins of the open data movement?
Yeah, the main origin of the open data movement, I guess in terms of the first real activity that happened outside of research, was around the MP's expenses scandal that broke in the UK. And this had the effect of basically MPs were spending taxpayer money on things that were probably shouldn't have been spending their money on. And so there was a big transparency problem. And that's been one of the big drivers across the whole world for getting open data out there. The facts, the raw data about what people were spending their money on. And that transparency agenda went into businesses because it's been found out that being transparent within businesses helps improve brand. And so that's been a big driver within business. But recently, actually beyond transparency, when we had the recession and economic downturn, and we've also got Brexit coming upon us with trade impact on that, it's actually about the economic impact of open data. Open data has become this new raw material. Some people refer to it as oil. I don't like that because oil you use once, you burn it, it's gone. No one else can use it again. Data, everyone can use again and again and again. Everyone can have a copy of it. And so the benefits that can come economically from that raw material, everyone being able to use it, everyone being able to innovate with it, is a great thing for the economy. ODI, open data, most definitely, I would say, more of a UK origin in terms of the kind of the grassroots movements around it. Obviously, the US had a big movement around open data surrounding the first election of Obama. And this is where all of the funding data for both parties was released as open data, and that really spurred on the impact of open data in the US, and it was a big part of that election cycle, if you like. So that was, and then when Obama became president, he put in an executive order that all presidential data would be open and machine readable. By default. So that then spurred on that movement, but equally at the same time we had a big movement worldwide in terms of transparency that happened in and around kind of 2003, 2004. This was the kind of the main key point of where it started, if you like.
So outside of the kind of US and outside of Europe, are we starting to see lots more interest in open data use and publication in Asia and emerging economies?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So there's the Open Data Barometer from the Web Foundation gives us a good indication of different types of countries worldwide, and they don't look at it in terms of necessarily just the distribution in terms of Asia and Africa, but they also look at it in terms of the capacity of the country. So you can see a lot of action in Tanzania and Rwanda actually at the moment as we shoot this. The capacity development in those countries has been bringing data on board, and it's interesting in Africa where you still have various transparency issues, but they're looking at it for economic growth.
So what's the history to the ODI? When was the ODI established? What's its overall purpose?
So a few questions there. So the ODI is coming up to its 5th birthday, believe it or not, towards the end of this year. So the ODI was established really around the transition in government that we had between the Labour government that we had a few years ago and then into the Conservative Lib Dem coalition that existed. At that point there was a big transfer between a transparency agenda and into a how do we get out of this recession sort of agenda. So it was all about the economic impact, and the ODI was founded with some government money to be based here in the wonderful part of East London that we're in this kind of Silicon roundabout area, and it was all about how technology and data could be a core part of the economic growth going forward, and data being that raw material that the companies around us here are all using to take in on a daily basis, and that's become a big part of businesses in the UK is seeing that data, as I say, as that raw material that can either enhance the operation they're doing at the moment or provide new opportunities to go into new business sectors and for new startups. So that's why we're seeing quite a hub around here at the moment.
So over time, the ODI has grown and become more international. What was kind of spurring that on?
So the ODI, as you know, was founded by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, inventor of the web, and Sir Nigel Shadbolt, professor of artificial intelligence, now at Jesus College in Oxford. And it's always been a really international agenda. Open data is actually a key part of the future of the web. Okay, so that's what kind of the big key focus. And so the real kind of the joining up of the network, and if you think about the way that the web evolves, it is an international movement. There is no boundaries on the web. And that's what's so beautiful about it. And so open data being a part of that, it really helped with kind of building this network of people who wanted to be connected in that open way so that everyone can move forward together. So the ODI has a global network of nodes that exist actually in, I think, every continent currently, if I'm correct. So this network really helps us to reach out and communicate the benefits of open data based on the country and the context of that node to the people locally. One of the key things that we do at the ODI is to work with governments and businesses in order to help them get data to the people who need it, or help them to use open data better. These are two of the key things that we do. And that's really become our mission at the Open Data Institute, is that aspect of getting data to those people who need it. And that's a key thing that open data can provide. So we work with various businesses in order to unlock that opportunity. So for example, I'll give you one, we've worked with a business locally. I said we're in Silicon roundabout, but Thomson Reuters are just around the corner from us, and we did a project with them and around opening up some of their data, very much a data company, previously very much about selling data and accessing to their services to their clients. But they realised there was an opportunity in open data which was in and around the identifiers that they had for companies and institutions that they hold information on. But they realised that people can't use these identifiers and talk about the data in their systems without those identifiers, those pieces of data being open. So it's a really big problem, and if I want to refer to this outside of that that particular ecosystem, it's a bit like me trying to refer to your house without being able to actually say the postcode, because I'm not allowed to use it. It's proprietary. I'm not allowed to say that because you don't have a commercial agreement in order to use that piece of data, the postcode. Can you imagine? So how would I be able to refer to that location? I'd be like, okay, it's in that road, 3 down on the left. Where is it? How do we refer to things? So this was the key realization, is that a lot of people are using data from lots of different locations but have no way of really authoritatively referring to it. That was one thing that we worked with Thomson Reuters, is that their customers themselves wanted open data, believe it or not. It wasn't about, I'll pay them for the data, now I've got exclusive access to it. It was like, we also need the open data to be able to share this with our customers. Right, to be able to work with our customers, we need the data to be able to flow down the chain. And if we have to negotiate new commercial agreements every single time, it actually gets in the way of our business. So it's a really interesting kind of change of a business model.
Thinking more generally then, if you were interested in creating a new startup, or if you were an existing organisation that wanted to engage more in open data, what kind of sources of information would you recommend someone go to kind of start developing their open data experience?
So there's an immense amount of resources out there that can help here. If you're a startup, there are currently some great European programs in and around open data that are fostering startups from all over Europe in using open data or innovating with open data, generating new business models. So there's quite a lot in this area. It's always a challenge because they still face the same startup challenges of finding the problem that actually exists and pitching it and actually coming up with a solution that's going to work and compete in the market at the moment. Perhaps it's more of a challenge, though, however, for existing businesses. And this is really where the services of the ODI have helped existing businesses to think differently about the culture that surrounds being more open, because it essentially is a cultural change issue. So you can read a lot, yes, but actually being able to then experience that and go through kind of workshop-type environments with companies is one thing that we've focused on here at the ODI. So for existing businesses who are finding it challenging, those are the things that we've been addressing here with some of our business innovation workshops that we've been specifically delivering into those areas. So it really depends on kind of where you're coming from and what the existing problem is.
So what would you say are the sort of the biggest challenges of trying to create more of an open culture within an existing organisation?
I guess that it comes down to change. I mean, it's well documented that change is difficult. Okay, and there's the change management processes and realizing that there's changes, and you can either, for a company like Thomson Reuters, find out, go and interview their customers, etc., find out what the values might be, and find out how the business can evolve. And I guess they would put it down as an evolution of the product set, which is really interesting because they've found that the area where they can evolve their products to be doing stuff with open data and allow their customers to use open data and evolve into that market. For other businesses like Landmark, the real problem is that almost overnight their entire business model was wiped out because the data that they were previously collecting, they were adding bits of value to and then selling on, kind of disappeared because do people need to go to Landmark anymore? Or do they just go and get the open data for free off the government portals? And those are the kind of the threats that come from the mandated kind of open data activities that come from previous sources of data that used to be open. So there are bigger challenges there that businesses are facing with the kind of requirements for the data usage that are out there. Obviously, at the other end of the spectrum, there's that great opportunity that now we've got this raw material like soil that can be used by everybody. So you've got startups that can pop up almost overnight on the back of data, and a good famous example of that was the bike accident data in London. So that data set was released, and within 48 hours, I think it may have even been 24 hours, there was an app that you could download onto your phone that would tell you all of the bicycle black spots in London on your route as you cycled around within 48 hours.
Because I guess another advantage of the openness of open data simply means that it's much easier to experiment and try things. And if something doesn't work, then you've maybe spent a bit of time. But it's not a case where you would have to spend a considerable amount of money buying proprietary data first and then kind of experimenting with it. So I guess that must really accelerate the rate of innovation.
Oh, it certainly can do, yeah. There's a lot of misconception around that open data is of worse quality than data you pay for that exists within open source as well. If you're paying for something, there's a perception that it might be better. But there's certainly good sources of open data out there where you can freely experiment to your heart's content and then decide whether there is an opportunity here in order to expand the business. What's quite interesting, obviously, the pressures on existing businesses are indeed budgets have sort of been falling a little bit, so the ability to explore this is also quite difficult, which is where you get this whole idea of open innovation coming in, where companies of lots of businesses in a similar area kind of conglomerating together in order to open up an innovation pathway moving forward. And you see, especially in over the last few years, and with London, you see kind of businesses moving around in order to be tactically placed next to other businesses. So it's not just about the data, it's also about the innovation that comes as a result of being close to others who are innovating. And again, that's a key part of being, I guess, located as we have been here, but it's also happening in other cities, not just in the UK. So, for example, Leeds, where there's a huge activity around open data with the local council, and we've got a big node in Leeds, but also around the world as well.
Open data is very positive, but what does the sort of development community sometimes struggle with? What do businesses, where do they need more help in being able to really seize the opportunities from using open data?
There's a few areas. There's obviously the whole aspect of bringing in and working with data. So there's kind of technical aspects around that. But mostly those have been covered. There's plenty of stuff out there in how to use data better, how to bring it in. There are challenges with actually how to get hold of it in the first place, because there's so much data hidden on the web that people really don't know is there and can be used, or making it clear around the fact that it is usable and it is open data. I mean, there are aspects around licensing that we'll mention in another part of this, but so the key aspects of actually gathering and technical tend to actually be less problematic than aspects surrounding kind of what you do with it. Realizing the opportunities and really focusing on the business model that could be found around that, because there's obviously those incremental changes that can be made, small scale changes, but obviously gripping onto that innovation and trying to market lead, which is a problem when you think everyone's got access to this thing. You see this within a good way of thinking about this going back years was as soon as the MP's expenses were published openly, the stories in the press fell away, because now everyone's got access to this. So how do I know I've got an exclusive? How do I have something been reported before? Because it's just there now. The data is out there. Whereas things like freedom of information requests do tend to almost guarantee an exclusive. So with open data, you have got that, are we going to be the fastest to market with this thing? How much should we invest in this thing? So there is that kind of threat, and again, that affects the R&D side of a company.
Which comes back to the initial point that you can kind of have data, you can create some kind of application, but if your users or consumers don't have the knowledge to actually interpret that and take something meaningful away from that, it sort of limits.
Exactly, which is where kind of the Locatable struggled in this area because there wasn't that much use of the data. They were trying to compete with the big guys in the areas, you know, your Zooplas, your other big guys in the property market, trying to disrupt it a little bit. And that's still happening today with things like Purple Bricks and others. They're still trying to disrupt. And I believe there is new models out there, but it's really difficult to break into those kind of areas and compete with the big guys. So for startups, my recommended thing to do with open data is not to look at the data and then trying to create a problem that doesn't exist. Find a problem first that you have, and then see if the open data can help you solve it. So Locatable ended up becoming Splittable, where they were all living in London. And of course, with not necessarily making as much money as they wanted with Locatable, living in a house that had 8 people in it. And the big problem they had was splitting the bill in the house. And there is open data out there about things like energy tariffs and stuff like this that can help you, with smart meters and all the rest of it, that can then help you manage household bills when you're living in a multi-tenancy household of 8 or 9 people. So what they did is created a company where there was an app that drew in open data along with spending data from other sources in order to help manage spending within a house live, so that the people who were there could see, oh, my housemates just bought the shopping, or okay, we've just, because of the energy usage last night on that football match or whatever, it's going to cost us this much in bills. And that became one of the top 5 recommended student apps within most of the student lists this year. So, and then that got venture capitalist funding as a result of having a market, having a niche problem.
So I guess in that interesting way, almost the thematic type of data almost acts as an ionizing point or a connecting point for interested parties to kind of come together and start to create new ideas and exchange ideas through open innovation.
Absolutely. You could have a thematic topic of the data or just the problem that exists. Being able to find that problem that a lot of people can relate to but don't really care about the data is a really good way of trying to look at how can open data help me in that area.
I guess at the same time, sort of coming back to the idea about the communities and actually identifying problems, it may well be better to go to events to find out what are shared problems within communities and then work with people who are publishing data, using their APIs, lobbying for new sources of data in order to be able to create new products and services.
Absolutely, and that should be a part of how you go about finding it. So you discover that there is some data available, you discover that there's a community of interest around this, and then going and actually talking or engaging with those people around the data that might be available or the community that's already using it is a really key way of building up, again, open innovation, is being open to that idea. And I do know that across the UK, certainly there's been examples of where kind of surreptitious community engagement, where councils or governments or businesses, employees attend community events but don't declare where they're from. So it can often be that the community is essentially moaning about the council not opening up the data, but not realising that there's 2 people from the council in the room. And then, 6 months later, the data's suddenly open. And it's finding out what the community's needs are and engaging with that community to realise the benefits that then actually, in that particular instance, have come back to the council. So now they have services that the community has provided that they don't need to.
If you're an organisation then, or a startup, and you're going to be using someone else's open data, or even publishing your own open data for other people to use, there is a potential, I guess, for some kind of risk. So when you open data, you need to quite carefully decide what exactly you're going to open. So you perhaps wouldn't want to open data on all of your employees, kind of how much they're paid and kind of where they live. So what are the kind of key risks that organisations need to consider?
You've obviously got things like breaking the law, right? Data protection has laws around it, and in Europe, actually, they've just got a lot harsher, such that you can be fined a percentage of your organisation's value, which I think is quite high. I can't remember the exact figure. It's somewhere like a third or something like that, which, if you
if you're a very, very large organisation,
a shocked face like that, a third of the fines are now not fixed.
Yep.
They're based upon your organisation's value. So, for a big university to leak its student record online, for example, a third of the university's value would be, you're talking a third of the university gone. That's the fines they can get up to that level, which is why data protection officers are now such a key role within institutions to make sure that they're not breaking the law in that way and are protecting people's privacy. And that sort of data should never be open. At the other end of the scale, there's the kind of the business risks. What happens if we open this data and somebody somehow manages to replicate our business model overnight? I mean, you're hoping that you've got the skilled employees inside your organisation that guarantee that you're still on the edge, you're still the best at providing it. But that might not potentially be the case. So you might want to think about, well, what other data is there that we have that we can start exploring, or maybe we're already publishing stuff we can make open that is then of mutual benefit, so other people can use it and then potentially provide benefit back to us, and then there's a growth around a relationship. So you can actually use open data to grow partnerships or relationships with your customers or other businesses, which is another key thing that I would say to consider for organisations before they publish data is, well, why? What's the end goal?
Thanks, Dave, for your insight. Excellent as ever.
Thank you very much, Tom, and see you again soon.